Guys, and welcome back to History Revision Success. So today I'm going to go through a GCSE based video and I'm going to focus on exam technique, structure, starter sentences, how to answer the comparison question in the AQA exam board to give you a really good structure to follow if you're studying any one of the 3 modules. So this is either your Power and the People exam, your Medicine Through Time exam, or your Migration exam. So there are 4 questions in this exam, in this topic, and I am going to go through today question number 3, which is explain 2 ways in which X and Y were similar / different. Now, this question has changed on the specification recently, and prior to this / different, every single question that's ever been asked has always been similar. How are they similar? So based on everything prior, I would suggest the most likely option would be the question is going to say explain 2 ways in which X and Y were similar. However, because they've added the / different, there is now that option that they might ask you explain 2 ways in which X and Y were different. So everything I'm going to run through in the video would be exactly the same. You either just need to focus on the similarity or the difference, depending on the question. So the type of question you'll be asked will look like one of these. So I've got all 3 options here. So it doesn't matter which module you take. As an example from Power and the People, we've got explain 2 ways in which the Peasants' Revolt and the Pilgrimage of Grace were similar. From Medicine, explain 2 ways in which public health in a medieval town and public health in a medieval monastery were different. Explain 2 ways in which the impact on Britain of the 100 Years' War and the Viking invasions of Britain were similar. So they will always follow that same thread. And what you'll have in this question are the word explain. So you know what skill you're looking for, you need to explain. You will have the fact we've got 2, they are asking for 2 examples. You will have your events, they will give you the first event and the second event, and you'll need to compare those 2 specific events. And then you'll have your final word, which will determine whether you're looking for similarities or you're looking for difference. I'm going to focus on this question just for the exemplar in this video. All of the others apply in exactly the same way. So in terms of structure, they've asked for 2 ways. So that's going to equate to 2 paragraphs. Now, in order to determine what you write about, that word similar or different is going to be important. I would always break down into cause, event, and outcome. And prior to writing, you need to think in your head, are these 2 events the same in cause, event, or outcome? Or if your question is on difference, are they different in cause, event, or outcome? Now, some events will be, you'll have the option to write about cause, event, or outcome, because actually they'll be the same or they'll be different in all 3 options. Some of them might not, and only you might have the option to write about 2 of them, in which case you have to select the 2 that fit. So you want to choose 2 of these 3 options. Now, being specific on cause, event, and outcome means you always have a way to think and prepare and plan. And it also means your paragraph is going to be very focused and you're going to be able to get the highest marks that you deserve. So 2 paragraphs, one of them will explain cause, event, or outcome. The other one will explain cause, event, or outcome, but they're not going to replicate each other. So if you do cause in the first one, you need to do event or outcome in the second one. Okay, so how do we actually write the paragraph? So both of your paragraphs are going to follow exactly the same structure, and this is it. So you're going to start with a topic sentence. And if you've watched any of my previous videos on exam technique, I am very focused on making sure you write that topic sentence. It needs to be clear. It needs to tell the examiner what you're writing about. It needs to sum up the whole paragraph in 1 sentence. And here in fact are your 3 topic sentences. You would just need to change the 2 events. You would just need to make sure the similar or different was correct. And you need to make sure the last final word reflects what you're writing about. After you've written that topic sentence, you're always going to write the word both. The most important thing in this question to achieve high marks on the mark scheme is that you're directly comparing continuously throughout. So here we go. Here's an easy trick to always make sure you hit that. You write both. You follow that with your point, okay? So whatever your point is, the reason why the Peasants' Revolt and the Pilgrimage of Grace are the same in their cause, it goes now. So I've written both avoided directly criticising the king and instead directed grievances against the monarch's advisors. That's my point. In both of these events, they don't criticise the king in their demands. They're both caused out of anger towards the monarch's advisors. Next, you're going to write, for example, in the first event, which for me is the Peasants' Revolt. Always write that, whatever your question. Then we follow it with a piece of evidence. So, for example, in the Peasants' Revolt, the rebels were dissatisfied with the oppressive system they lived under and wanted to remove corrupt priests and evil landowners. I've now extended that slightly just to show you kind of how you might reach a grade 9. So if you're looking for a grade 9 in this exam, full marks, you need some more precise evidence and maybe a little bit more. So I extended that answer there to go from a very good, strong kind of pass grade 6 level, perhaps a grade 7 if you write really clearly, into going into the grade 9. So we've got added on the end there, they blame their financial problems on John of Gaunt, so specific knowledge, the king's advisor, and showed their contempt by killing the Archbishop of Canterbury and attacking tax collector John Bampton. When King Richard asked the rebels, will you shoot your king? They clearly showed their loyalty towards him by listening and returning home. I've shown their very, very good analytical ability to prove with my evidence that my point is correct. I've proven with that final sentence that all of that evidence reflects the fact they are not targeting their anger towards the king, but they are targeting it towards the advisors. Next, you're going to write similarly, I can never say that word, similarly in your second event, the Pilgrimage of Grace for me, and you do exactly the same. You give the evidence of why the Pilgrimage of Grace matches up with your point. So I've written, Robert Aske wanted to dismiss Cromwell, Cranmer, Audley and Rich, advisors that he saw as giving the king poor advice. Ballads and manifestos were written about the evil councillors, and Aske publicly stated that they were loyal to Henry VIII himself. So again, I've got some grade 9 knowledge there. I've got a quotation from the manifesto itself, from the rebellion. And I've made it clear that they're loyal to the king, and therefore my evidence sums up my point. Finally, I'm going to write a linking sentence at the end, which takes the summary back to the question. This shows that, like the Peasants' Revolt, both revolts did not question the monarch, but instead targeted those they saw as evil and corrupt advisors. So the structure, your opening topic sentence can be the same in any question. You just need to change the green, the blue, and the red to reflect what the question asks you. Second sentence, both. What's your point? Third sentence or couple of sentences, your evidence from event 1, follow it with evidence from event 2, and finish the paragraph with a linking sentence that restates your comparison point and goes back to the question. We've directly compared in 3 parts of this paragraph. We've given detailed specific evidence from event 1 and event 2, and we have done everything we need to hit the highest marks in the mark scheme. So as a paragraph, it would look like that. Now, again, this is a very, very strong grade 9 paragraph because I've included all of that additional specific evidence. You would not necessarily need to write this much. There it is as a structure that you can replicate with any question. You would just need to fill in the green with event 1, the blue with event 2, check that the red word fits with your question, and make sure you're writing about the right event, so cause, event, or outcome as that underlined final word in the sentence. Both, for example, event 1, similarly, event 2, this shows, done. Topic sentence, comparison sentence, example from event 1, example from event 2, linking sentence. You do that twice over and you've written a very, very strong answer. Now, I'm just going to finish the video with some information about grade 9. So in order to get a grade 9, first of all, you need to provide specific evidence. The second way of getting a grade 9 is to come up with some very, very interesting or highly intelligent, highly analytic comparison points themselves. Now, I think this question is a really difficult question because on the spot, it might be very hard to come up with the answers. What is the comparison? So one of my tips, and at the end of the video after this, I'll show you how I prepare and revise this question, but it is to kind of think about this and prepare it in advance. Now, when you're doing that, there are some obvious pairings that work that, I believe the exam board might be likely to choose. And if you would like me to go through some of those in a separate video, please like the video, please leave a comment. Obviously, it'd be very useful and helpful for me if you subscribe to the channel. But if you leave me those comments that tell me, yes, I would like this, then I can go and make them. So I'm going to run through one example of how to come up with some grade 9 comparison points that are above and beyond what the average student or what the textbook might give you. So I'm going to look at Simon de Montfort and Oliver Cromwell. So first of all, I'm going to brainstorm. What are my 3 points that might reflect this comparison? Now, normally we would like to stick to cause, event, and outcome. For the purposes of this, I've gone slightly off that road. Firstly, because our question is difficult. It's not asking us about events, it's asking us about individuals. Therefore, it's harder to stick quite so closely to that cause, event, and outcome. And secondly, because I want to really explore some grade 9 ideas. My biggest suggestion would be always try and stick to cause, event, and outcome. If it just does not work because it's asking about individuals or the circumstances, then you just need to go to option B and try and come up with some comparison points that you can think of, that exist. So first one, they both criticized the king for being a tyrant and became a tyrant themselves. Secondly, they both influenced greater levels of democracy and consensual rule after they left the position of power. And lastly, they both led to the developing loss of the king's prerogative right to demand taxation. Now, this final point is highly, highly, highly intelligent, if I do say so myself. I'll explain what I mean by that. But the only way you would know this is if you had, an amazing teacher who really gave you that extended knowledge, you went to do some reading yourself, or you really put the dots together and worked it out. That kind of information is not written anywhere in the textbooks. If you write about that, then you are really showing you are above and beyond and deserve that grade 9. Now, in terms of evidence, for my first point about them both being a tyrant, Simon de Montfort, here's my evidence. He has a council of 9, despite the provisions of Oxford stating a council of 15. Now, you can explain this shows a centralisation of power, a loss of, such widespread democratic rights. He appointed friends and allies. He invites commoners to Parliament to increase his support base when he feels threatened. And Oliver Cromwell, he shut down Parliament from 1653 when they would not pass the petitions he supported, such as the Humble Petition. He secured his son as a successor, even though he was not an effective choice. He enforced Puritanism with very, very little tolerance across the country. The pieces of evidence I've put in red are really those grade 9 ideas, that information that you've only got because you have gone and researched it, you've read some articles, you've really expanded your knowledge base on these subjects. For the second point, they both influence greater levels of democracy. Simon de Montfort was known as the father of the House of Commons. He invited knights and burgesses for the first time to Parliament, and after him we had the Edward I model Parliament. Oliver Cromwell, his relationship between king and Parliament was forever changed after he left office. We moved to a constitutional monarchy, so when Charles II came to power, we no longer had the absolutist monarchy, we had a constitutional monarchy. The king was bound by a constitution. We still have that to this day. At the Putney debates, the heads of proposals were adopted into the English Constitution, which demanded Parliament was called at least every 3 years, something that we still have that still affects our country. showing that we have greater levels of democracy. You're no longer able to do what Charles I did, where he had his 11 years of tyranny and he didn't call Parliament for 11 years. Again, in red, there is that evidence which goes above and beyond. And finally, both led to the developing loss of the king's prerogative right to demand taxation. So Simon de Montfort established the principle that the king could not arbitrarily call taxation, but had to call Parliament. So I found this out when I was doing some reading, extended reading of articles, and I thought it was highly interesting because the thing that Oliver Cromwell and Charles II developed further, because after Oliver Cromwell is removed, or well, he dies, doesn't he? But we go back to the king, the restoration, after his son gives up the position of power. Charles II has to sign the Declaration of Breda. Now, this means he's no longer, as a king, able to tax his subjects. He cannot use his prerogative right to tax, prerogative meaning the right of the king. Okay. Instead, he's given a grant of £1.2 million. Now, that's a huge moment in the monarch's power because they are no longer allowed to tax the people. To this day, the Queen cannot call a tax. Simon de Montfort started that process off because it was him during that period of time who said, actually, the king is not allowed to tax by himself. And that's very, very different to modern, well, not modern, to comparative rulers of the time. In France, for example, they had an absolutist king right up until the revolution and the king's execution. The king was able to tax whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. In England, we don't have that. After Simon de Montfort, the king has to call Parliament in order to ask for taxation. He's still able to ask for it. He's not after Oliver Cromwell, but he is able to ask for it, but he has to go through Parliament. So both of these men are using their position to limit the king's right to tax and to demand tax. And I think that's a really intelligent point to put across if you had this question. So how would I prepare for this essay question? What I would do is I would create a table that looks like this, and I would do as many different comparison events as I possibly can. And again, if you'd like me to run through some examples, please like and comment on this video and I will do that. And I would sit there and I would try and think, okay, Peasants' Revolt and Chartism, People's Charter, right, why are they the same in their cause? And you have to work it out. If you have a teacher who gives you that information, fantastic. If you don't, you have to sit there and think. After you've thought, think about your evidence to back it up. Provide the evidence on your plan, memorize the plans, or at least memorize the vague idea of the plan. And then in the exam, if those events come up that you've planned, you're set. If they don't, you've at least already thought through most of the major events and why they might be similar in cause, event, or outcome. And it will likely be much, much easier for you to find similarities between the ones you are given or differences. Now, another trick I would do, and I absolutely recommend, is every single event on this thematic timeline, write down a summary, a very short summary of the cause, the event, the outcome, and make sure you know it. Then in the exam, you're sat there, 2 events come up you haven't planned, you can simply jot down or remember, okay, well, I know the cause of that is that, I know the cause of that is that, oh, look, they're both religious, or oh, look, they're both economic, or whatever the situation is. So there is my quick fire guide on how to answer the AQA comparison question for the thematic module. Please leave me comments and ask for what you would like to see next. I'm going to try and do the other questions on this paper, and then I'll try and do the other papers as well, because I think that might be helpful for you, and I would really appreciate it if you can support my channel by subscribing.